The book is called, as I think most of you know, Returning to My Mother's House, Taking Back the Wisdom of the Feminine. And this is a love letter to my mother when it all comes down to the essence. My mother died when I was 23. She had just turned 55. And this was the way I came to know her after 30 years. And I'm going to read the prologue to you, which I think gives you a sense of why I wrote the book, and hopefully some of what I think the reader will get as they read the book. My mother died 36 years ago, but the truth is, she's more alive to me now than ever before. At 59, I have lived 4 years longer than my mother did. In these last years, as I wrote about Mom, as I felt certain that I too would die at 55, as my extra bonus years became a precious gift, I realized that it's impossible to separate where a mother ends and a daughter begins. I realized that those we love never really die. But what surely did die, long before my mother did, were her dreams and her connection to her innate female wisdom. A gifted and successful artist with a passionate spirit and a wildly colorful bohemian wardrobe, my mother gradually gave up her vivid individuality as she grew into her roles as wife, working mother, and aspiring member of an upscale conservative society. Then, wrestling with a fatal illness, she died too soon. The spiritual loss, more than the physical loss of my mother, has haunted me. This loss of my mother's authentic self has shaped my life, propelling me around the globe to reclaim what she left behind, to retrace the series of small deaths she suffered each time she abandoned more of her instinctual wisdom. I started writing this almost 30 years after my mother had died, and some of you know the profile of motherless daughters as coined by Hope Edelman, which says that women who have lost their mothers from very young up to about 25 go into a long period of denial. The wound is just too great and too soon for us to process. And that was certainly true of me. There was a lot of the book describes that my workaholism and overdrive was an attempt to cover the grief that I hadn't dealt with. And so interestingly, I didn't start out to write about my mother. I was asked to write a book about my choice not to have children, which is in the book, but just a tiny paragraph there. And so I started off on that adventure, and it was completely boring to me. And all I wanted to do was write about my mother. And so it was the magical way, the imagination opened the doorway into my grieving. And I wept doing most of the writing because it was my grieving, basically.